8.5th episode.
This is episode 9.
Yeah,
I think we can count it as episode 9.
I think it's got to be 8.5. I think it's got to be episode 8.5.
We'll see.
I will see to it, audio and video listeners alike. I will make sure it's 8.5. I will make sure it's labeled as that. So this is going to be part 2 of our Indiana Jones. We talked too much, as we said in the last one, so thank you for sticking around. Hopefully, what we said in the first part was interesting enough that you want to watch.
To come back for part 2, yeah.
And hopefully, if it wasn't interesting in the first part, you'll find this part more interesting than that.
More interestinger?
Yeah, more interesting. So, if you didn't like the first episode, good news. This conversation that's about to come up is way more interesting. If you did like the first one, good news. It's just as interesting.
That's a good hook. That's a good hook.
Yeah, good hook, line, and sinker.
So I think in certain instances, CGI is cheaper than practical, but and I'll be interested to see in Oppenheimer how much is,
Well,
practical.
Granted, maybe this is an unfair comparison because we haven't seen it yet.
Right. But just budget
my guess is Oppenheimer is going to be way more limited in scope. Because let's do a more comparable film, a film with like equal amount of action and stuff. What was like the budget of something like Inception or Tenet or something like that used a lot more practical effects?
Tenet was $205 million.
Really?
Yeah.
So, in which case, never mind. I'm actually on your side here. They spent more money to get worse looking of a thing. What was Inception? And let's convert it for inflation.
Inception. Oh, the Inception box office was $836 million.
Inception. I saw that pop up, and I was like, almost $1 billion. 160 million. Well, let's convert that to modern. I assume that'd be more.
So let's see. And this came out. When did that come out? 2010.
Yeah, 2010.
So
I could have told you that after I read the date on there.
So 160 million 2010 to now. Let's see if there's a good conversion. So 160 million in 2010. Wait, is that right? No, that doesn't seem right. See, we're just Googling this right now, trying to figure it out. Right here? Okay, let's see. You can talk. Do you want to talk about something else?
So what I want to say here is that this the reason why I wanted Will to talk about this. If you go back into a lot of our episodes, one of Will's big things is do it practically, which I think is a very, very good sentiment to have in most instances. The problem is we're in this sort of like, it's been bastardized, kind of deal, where like CGI unlocks a great deal of potential for us as filmmakers. It gives us so much more opportunity. It gives us a lot better ideas. Like it makes things more accessible. You're not going to get things like what was it? Like I don't know. Like insert. What was the? I cannot think of it. But like you're not going to get these like very grotesque looking alien stuff that are like you're not going to get massive alien armies and stuff without the use of CGI. But at the same time, like what should be used as a supplemental thing to like basically like, okay, we'll get it a little bit up. We'll do some as much as we can practically. But if you need a non-Euclidean a grotesque like agent like Dawn of Cthulhu type creature. Oh, it's $223 million, so pretty comparable. Yeah, they probably should have done a lot more practically, I feel.
Sorry. So that's 160 million for Inception back in 2010 is 223 million today.
Yeah.
So,
but either way, like there is a place for CGI, but the problem is what was like, hey, this supplemental stuff can really help you guys with your films and really help things, was a way for studios to be like, oh, wonderful, we have a way that we no longer have to put as much time and effort into constructing all these complex costumes and stuff. And then a film, like, studios used it as an easy way to cut down on budgets and cut down on costs. And then filmmakers used it as a way to increase the scope of their film. But neither of them, it's like Social Security cards. They made Social Security numbers just so you could collect your Social Security. And the Social Security Service literally said, please do not use this for identification. It's not good for identification. And the U.S. government said, we're going to use it for identification.
That didn't work.
Yeah, it didn't work. It doesn't work well. And if anyone guesses your number, you lose everything.
Yeah.
Go ahead and guess 16 digits. That's somebody. You can take that. But so that's sort of what it is, where they got told, hey, we have this new technology that you guys can use. And they both, like, studios, financiers, directors, everyone just sort of got the wrong lessons from it. And it increased the scope, and that's how we get these stupid fight scenes that don't look like anything and don't mean anything. But I want to lead that into the next conversation that I want to have about this film, which is what it did right, and what Indiana Jones has always done right, which is how to construct fights and chases and stuff.
And just the feeling of adventure.
Yeah.
I would consider the Indiana Jones franchise one of the original, it's kind of created the template for the adventure franchise, I would say. Which
is hilarious, because Indiana Jones himself was supposed to be this sort of amalgamation and ripoff of a bunch of other older like adventurous films. You look at his outfit, it's like cut and paste from every adventure movie that Steven Spielberg watched growing up as a kid. Yeah. And I kid you not, you look at these, I can't remember any of the names of these films, but oh my God, like the hat, the outfit, everything is so generic, and it would have been generic and bland, but he took this template and now it's considered just this original thing. No one believes me when I tell them, yeah, Indiana Jones was like a ripoff, or at least was designed to be like a ripoff, or pay homage to like all these older things. Everyone's like, no, all his looks all original and immediately recognizable. And it is immediately recognizable, but not original. It's far from original. And for good reason, because he took all those tropes and stuff, he took those and he flipped them all on their head. So what everyone had recognized of like cheap, hokey, kind of like melodramatic, really out there plots, he took that and he went, we're going to give you a story and a character that's very interesting. We're going to give, how does Spielberg even talk? I normally do impressions, but
don't ask me. I can't do a good impression of him,
but yeah, so that, like, he took all these tropes and he flipped them on their head, and he gave a very interesting and very and a story with legitimate depth. He didn't do, like, it wasn't super cheap and hokey. It looked good. It had a lot of weight. It wasn't melodramatic, and it took all those tropes from all these melodramatic, cheap, hokey, garbage films that were just sort of thrown out to make, like, for quick cash grabs, and it made it good. It made it great. But the reason why is because there's causality in everything that happens in Indiana Jones. And if you're writing fight scenes, if you're writing chase scenes, please, for the love of God, take these lessons. Because I went into Indiana Jones, the Dial of Destiny, hearing nothing but bad things, reading terrible, terrible leaks, which thank God turned out to be fake. But still, like, all these terrible leaks. My brother, who watches all these like film reviewers and stuff, kept giving me like tiny little spoilers that were supposed to be like horror story type deals. But I sat down in the theater and I was a little bit scared of what I was going to see. I thought it was going to be bad. And then the opening scene happened, and despite the CGI being pretty obvious in a lot of instances and the face not exactly lining up in some things, which is a little nitpicky, I'll admit that, but at the same time, it's worth noting. I feel I'm not gonna say you shouldn't have talked about that because it's nitpicky.
Well, no.
'Cause
I mean, I agree. It's like I think just because like, you know, I am just a big Indiana Jones fan. You know, I was like very critical about just the film in general. But just I didn't mean to interrupt again. But
No,
just
please.
to speak, it was like it is that opening sequence is fun and it is just it is good. You know, it's just there are a couple like the CGI that's just being a little, you know, it's like
But again, that opening scene, when that happened, like as things were happening, I calmed down and I sat back in my seat. I wasn't wearing this, so I could. I sat back in my seat and I was like, "It's gonna be okay. This is Indiana Jones." It felt like an Indiana Jones opening.
Yeah.
And so here when you're designing a fight scene, here's what you do: you take the set piece, and I talked about this in The Flash, in our review of The Flash. Where I was telling Hollywood, please stop making your fight scene so stupid. Like, making something bigger doesn't make it better. Just throwing a bunch of, like, random CGI soldiers and that stuff, or it just looks stupid and hokey. But Indiana Jones, you can take lessons from this, and not even just for these small, like, engagements like Indiana Jones usually has, where it's just one guy doing these things. You can use this to develop into a larger battle if you're doing, like, a huge war story or something like that. But it's causality. And it's set piece, and using the set pieces intelligently, because it isn't just massive spaceship crashes and that's it. This, or I guess in a lot of other films, it'd be like there was a train and it is moving, and that is what that is the set piece, is that there's a train and it's moving. And you can do a lot of interesting stuff with that, sure, but usually what that culminates in is they're fighting on top of it, which they do in this one, granted. They're fighting on top of it, and that's supposed to be the big stakes, and that's all that there is, and it doesn't really change much, aside from being like, oh, isn't this so awesome? There's, like, on top of a train. But this film says, oh, and what happens, you see this in Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade when they're in the tank, or in whichever one it is where they're fighting by a plane, and, like, the propeller.
Raiders.
Yeah, Raiders. Here's how you construct fight scenes. You take your set piece. So in this instance, it's a train, and you take a look at each individual aspect of that, and you develop a thing within that. So the first thing that happens with the train, you need to get onto a train, but it's already moving. So how do you do that? Well, Indiana Jones is gonna he's gonna take a motorcycle. And not only, how do you get onto that train? Well, there's motorcycles and stuff. Okay, cool. But it's like the double car. And so he's like, well, how can I make that interesting? Just getting on a motorcycle and then jumping on the train, that's cool, but it's not interesting. So how do you make it interesting? You give him his own fight scene where he has to dismount onto it from a truck. All right, I'm going to back up here because I just realized how much more depth there is to this. Indiana Jones needs to catch up to a train, right? So what does he do? He gets into a car so he can go do that. Complication. Here's how we make it interesting. We put high-ranking German generals in this car. Well, that's not good. Indy doesn't speak German, and he doesn't know who these people are or where he's supposed to be going. So he's just going to kind of pretend he sees the train, and then he's like, all right, well, this is my goal. He's going to go off, and so now there's the complications of having these generals in the back. How do you make that interesting? Well, they're going to try and stop him or whatever. They're going to have guys on motorcycles who are going to try and be like, hey, what are you doing? Because they don't know that he's Indiana Jones. How do you get that? You have Indiana Jones dismount the car and steal the bike. There's a guy on the bike. Well, he needs to get rid of him, so they have the machine gun swinging at him, and they pick an individual point on each thing. So on the motorbike, there's a second guy on the bike to the side. One interesting thing can we do with that? There's a machine gun mounted there, so now Indiana Jones has to wrestle with that. Takes him out. Gets to the train. There's a gun emplacement on the back of the train. How do you deal with that? You lose him. Get on there. On the train, you have confined space. You have the top of the train, which they use. So you have confined space. You have a lot of crowds. You have individual cars doing all these things. So you can take a look, and in each individual instance of set piece, the director says, what is the most interesting thing? What are all the ways that that makes this thing interesting? and then you play with each of those. You don't just say, well, they fight on a train, and that's it. You say, okay, he gets onto the train. We're going to use the confined spaces of the halls to give him instances where he can evade capture. We give him instances where he can, where it heightens the tension because now it's really crowded and they're looking for him. And then just do that. Look at wherever you're going to fight, whether it's on a mountain or in Tangier doing a chase where everything's super narrow and you have all these cars coming and you have a car that's prone to flipping or whatever. Look at the most interesting way to execute it and pick each individual aspect and go from boom to boom to boom to boom and make sure each builds on their next. You can't just say he gets on the train and then he is on top of the train and then he is in the train and then it has to be he's going onto the train because it has this thing that he needs.
Right.
He can't go the direct way because it's blocked off and he just got recognized. Therefore, he goes up top to try and get there to get what he needs. While on top, he is stopped from getting to where he needs because they see him up there and go up. And so you always need to have it never do and then, always do because or however.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the I will say that the train sequence at the beginning of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade also, it does everything that you just talked about, and it's that I do agree is a good example, of this film pulling off that adventure and that feeling, because it did it once already in The Last Crusade, and I think that it did it very successfully in this sequence and in the film in general, but specifically since you were talking about this sequence.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah.
Yeah. Well, because what's the alternative? The alternative, I'll throw shade at Star Wars here. I'll 100% do this.
Which trilogy?
We're talking the prequels right now because it deserves it. It deserves it. I love the prequels, but it deserves this. Geonosis... The fight scene makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. They don't do anything interesting with the terrain. All they do is they're in a coliseum and therefore they get slaughtered and they do the dumbest tactical moves ever. But don't worry, it's because there's a lot of lasers and stuff going around and you have all these Jedi and it's deadly, so a lot of them die, and isn't that so cool? But no, it's not. And then after that, they just have big hordes of soldiers running forwards across open terrain at other big hordes of soldiers across open terrain. And it doesn't look interesting. It's not cool. It's not fun. It's just stupid. And they could have done a lot more interesting stuff with that. And they do. In the Clone Wars TV show, when they go to Geonosis again, they do this where they have, all right, this cave, how are ways that we can play with this cave? They're on open terrain. How do we make open terrain interesting? It's a kill zone, so they circle their gunships and they do all these there's ways to make open terrain fighting interesting, but it can't be just that. Make your spaces interesting and make sure it's integral to progressing your plot. Right. So that's my little soapbox for the day. I feel that we've exhausted what we can say, unless you have more.
I don't think so. This
is a long episode.
Yeah, we might end up splitting it into 2 episodes.
2 parts. That's right, because
we could do that.
Yeah, you know what? That's what we're gonna do. You guys just talked us into it.
Yeah, I'm. But yeah, it's I do want to say I 100% do not agree with the harsh criticism that this film has received. Well, I 90%.
Yeah.
And the main reason is because it's still indie. It's still Harrison Ford playing a very charismatic and fun Indiana Jones character. So I don't think it deserves the amount of harsh criticism that it has been getting.
Honestly, the harsh criticism that has been getting, in my experience, super harsh stuff, is usually from people who watched Indiana Jones, like people who are typically in my position, but are now pretending like they care more than they ever really did. Where they've seen all of the movies, they haven't seen them in a while, and then they saw this one, and then just because it's another remake or a sequel or whatever, they were just like, I don't like it. And so they're unfairly harsh on it because it does things that they don't remember from the first ones, even though it's probably still there when you go back to it, and they just don't like it because they think it's different than the other ones. When it's really not different in the ways that they think it is.
I will say, I guess speak on that point, I do wish that they would still kind of stop remaking or, creating sequels of films. Not that this one isn't good, but it's just they did.
We didn't need it.
Yeah, they honestly should have stopped after number 3, but
well, that's also worth noting. Everyone's like, and you do this too. I'm not just throwing shade specifically at you, but in our other episodes, we hear this all the time. This keeps coming up in conversations about they need to stop making sequels and remakes. This isn't everyone thinks it's a distinctly modern problem, but it's really not. Historically, Hollywood will go through these phases where they just they'll just keep making remakes and sequels. I mean, Star Wars got 3 movies, Terminator got 3 movies and stuff, and then you keep having these dips of periods where they make all these super original stuff. And Spielberg is actually one of the bigger reasons why sequels and remakes keep happening modern wise. But it's not like.
But usually, I guess a good rule there is they usually tried to do it in trilogies. Like Back to the Future, they had written and were filming, I think, 2 of the movies at the same time. So they had written out that franchise for 3 films.
Yeah.
The idea of having 6 movies in a franchise, that didn't get too popular until a bit later. Fast and Furious has 10 movies now.
Yeah, and it's going to be, I think, 12 or 13.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like that's one of those things. It's like, yeah, they did make sequels
and remakes and
well, I don't know how many remakes
all the time. The problem is because most people, they watch films from the 80s and they're like, okay, cool, this is original, but usually it's from something from the 30s or 40s or something. That was Star Wars itself was essentially fan fiction of Flash Gordon. Lucas wrote Star Wars intending for it to be a Flash Gordon, couldn't get the rights to make Flash Gordon, so just made it its own thing. So usually what happens is you'll get remakes and stuff, and because the source material's kind of obscure, people either forgot about it or it didn't perform well or something like that. It's typically just not. I mean, Indiana Jones is an amalgamation of a bunch of adventure movies that Spielberg watched. It's essentially like a reboot of a lot of those in a way. So just we're in one of those phases. It's lasting longer than it should. And the market's gonna end up crashing. I mean, we're already seeing big box office films are currently crashing, not really performing to expectations. So,
well, and I guess so. Just to, I know we keep going, but it's because we're splitting into 2 episodes.
Yeah.
So.
Now that we've decided that was the full intention. That was always the intention.
But so it's, I guess, because I know you say that Indiana Jones Spielberg took elements and stuff from other adventure films that he's seen, and that I could see that being a possibility. I don't want to admit that, but
no one does.
I guess still the character and the story of Indiana Jones was original IP at the time. But the issue with a lot of today's films is they're just making remakes, sequels, or reboots of films that came out 40 plus years ago. Like carbon copies almost. Star Wars Force Awakens came out 2014. It was basically the exact same story as Star Wars A New Hope.
Yeah. And granted, Force Awakens was probably the better of that trilogy.
It was.
But I I know people like The Last Jedi. If you like, you can like it. We're not gonna like really touch on that or anything because that's not what this episode is. But again, like all these hard reboots or soft reboots or hard sequels or soft sequels or whatever, like we're in a phase right now where people want to do that because there's a thing called an integrated audience. And so when you reboot or make a sequel, you have an audience already. You have people who are going to watch it because it's another Indiana Jones or because it's another Star Wars. And I remember talking to my dad about like the current state of Star Wars a while ago. And I think it was like right after Kenobi first released or whatever. And I just was like, yeah, it's just not good or whatever. But he's like, but look, all I'm saying, we're getting more Star Wars than we've gotten in the past like 20 or 30 years. I was like, that's not like a good thing. Like, I'm glad. Like, so, but again, if fans are going to keep watching it,
right,
they're going to keep making it because they know it's safe, that they can get money. So if you're a fan of these things, stop going. Stop. That's not going to be good. If you're sick of reboots and remakes, become a fan of a new thing. So they have to start making new things. But like, again,
that being said, you should still see this Indiana Jones film.
Yes. Again, this one is a little bit of an exception. Maybe you don't like it as much as we did. I like it as entertainment. As far as critically examining it as art, I'd have to go back and rewatch it in order to give a better take on it. But it's definitely worth seeing for the entertainment.
Yeah. And again, to see Harrison Ford up on the big screen again is rewarding. He's good. Yeah, he is, and it is a fun film, to go see.
I was talking to my brother about the biggest. I think the reason why you and I usually disagree on films is because you view whether or not a film is good or whatever based upon its entertainment, because it's built as entertainment, and that's not like a wrong or a bad way or a lesser way of looking at films.
I guess different.
It's a different way, and I always do it as a critical examination of like art, or as it is as an art form, and that sounds really pretentious and dumb, and to an extent it is. But at the same time, it's just the reason why we typically disagree. Even if I'm like you'll see. Usually when we disagree, I'm like, I agree with you. It's super entertaining, but I'll still give it a bad rating. Is because
from an artistic point of view.
Well, it's because you and I, we view films as a different thing. Mm-hmm. And so if you're one of the people who views film as entertainment, or primarily as its purpose to be primarily as entertainment, this movie's more than, like, this movie's probably really up there. It's definitely better than The Flash 2023 as far as entertainment.
Yeah.
And a lot of the other stuff. If you're looking for like something super like artistically sound or whatever, this is probably not the greatest. I'm not gonna say it was like bad or anything. It's definitely better than some of the other stuff, especially that's been releasing this summer so far. Cough cough Flash 2023. I will keep crapping on it, but like, if that's just not what you're watching movies for, don't listen to people telling you it's bad art, because if you're not looking at it from that lens, it doesn't matter.
Right.
So.
And I guess that's like, traditionally, these blockbuster films were released. The blockbuster was more entertainment, I'd say.
Which is funny, because it was the whole blockbuster movement was revived by The Godfather, and Coppola very specifically hated blockbusters.
Wasn't Jaws the start of the blockbuster film?
It was the start of no. Blockbuster was a huge thing. Like Cleopatra was a huge example of blockbuster. I think that one was like the 60s or something. I think that one bombed, but like
Jaws brought it back though.
Coppola brought it back with The Godfather. He was one of the, or maybe it was like Jaws and The Godfather. But all I know is, when we were talking about in my producer's class, they were talking about the irony of Coppola being that he hated blockbusters, but his film was what had brought back blockbusters as a financially viable thing. But the reason why The Godfather and Jaws worked was because they were solid entertainment, but also pretty solid art. Even though Jaws is a bit sensationalist or whatever, still I think it holds up artistically.
Jaws, is that
What?
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm talking about Jaws right now.
Yeah.
What, Jaws 1975? Now look up The Godfather. When did Godfather come out?
Well, no, I was just the modern blockbuster.
Oh,
Cultural phenomenon.
now look at The Godfather. Because The Godfather was one of the highest grossing films of all time. I think it was the highest grossing film of all time for a while. So yeah, Will's about to do his apology for being wrong.
Well, no, because we were both right in a way.
Yeah.
So The Godfather helped invent blockbusters before Jaws. Okay. However,
let me
the modern blockbuster was considered, I guess, the start of was started kind of through Jaws, but The Godfather did
so again
start the blockbuster.
Here's the thing. What is
The
it?
summer
They were
blockbuster.
Spectacle films were a huge thing in Hollywood for a long time. Spectacle films was like a very high budget, high volume, like they were the thing, which was the precursor to the blockbuster. Because the blockbuster is primarily focused on big budgets and wide release. It's primarily focused on like the reception as opposed to the production. But God, how do I keep forgetting the words? I say it every 5 seconds. Spectacle pictures, films like Cleopatra. Basically there were the massive budgets, way overblown stuff like that. They were popular at the dawn of film. They were really popular because obviously it's showing like this is a new art form. Look at how big and spectacular we can get it, and it's all these people who typically wouldn't get to see like big grand theater productions now had the ability to like watch a film, and it would be really, really expensive and really spectacular. But then as time went on, people just sort of were like, I don't care anymore. And so they flopped. And then The Godfather came in, very big budget, very wide release. And that like sort of like kicked it back off again. Because Hollywood did not want to touch spectacle films after the crash, because Paramount, all the big five were making these massive investments in films that just kept flopping, and it would be like $300-500 million, and that would just go down the drain because people wouldn't go see them. So they started focusing more on smaller pictures and they'd release more of them. So it was higher volume, smaller pictures, and that's how they'd make their money back, and those became popular. Godfather happened, massive budget, wide release, and that sort of kicked it back. Jaws came in, and boom, just market went up in flames, and then we had the blockbuster back. So yeah, that's your little film history. I spent $12,000 a semester to get that.
Well, and I guess that's just to say that we need
the market to crash again.
Well, not necessarily to crash.
That doesn't
help
studios
but
no,
we need something to jumpstart that new, innovative, refreshing.
You know what would jumpstart that? Disney losing a lot of money.
What they are. I mean,
Disney needs to hemorrhage a lot of money in like a single move.
Yeah, they're losing a lot of money, especially with all of their Disney live action remakes as well. They're just not working.
Which again is really funny, because what caused the death of the spectacle film was like they were low volume, high budget. So you'd make typically, I think it was like one of them a year, and then they'd release and they'd be shown all year until the next one was done with production and release. But this one, Disney and Marvel, which was I guess the same thing, but a lot of the bigger players are doing things where it's big budget and high volume at the same time. Which I mean, that's a recipe for that's keeping the gas can by the fire.
It's starting to be a situation for them where it's about quantity over quality, and the audiences are starting to see that. And that's why there's a lot of film, and it's not just Disney. I mean, we can look at The Flash, which in itself wasn't a great film. However, people didn't go see it.
Yeah,
it didn't get horrible reviews, but people
should have
aren't. They just aren't going to see it, and they're not going to see these big films, and it's because the overall quality is really low. But the studios are just pumping them out like it's
spectacle. I saw a meme the other day got sent to me. And I hate when people describe memes on podcasts and stuff because it feels so out of touch, but I'm going to do it right now. But it was literally like Marvel fans, after watching a 20-minute headache-inducing CGI clusterfuck of a fight scene, and it's just like, oh my God! Like, I can't follow it. It's too complex and yet not doing anything with it, and it's all spectacle. It's all about like, look at how big these visuals are. Stop blowing up buildings. Stop having big alien creatures crash into buildings or whatever. It's just not interesting. It's costing you too much money. Do something smaller scale. Do something original, and maybe you'll get some people out there. And that's why a lot of them are moving to television, because they can do the same thing but cheaper, and they're still hemorrhaging money on that because they're not actually focusing on making things interesting. They're focused on making spectacles that people can watch and be like, oh, wow. And that's that. As a Star Wars fan, that keeps happening. Like, everyone was like, did you see Kenobi? I was like, yeah, it sucked. And like, what? It didn't suck. They had that big fight scene. It's like, yeah, it was a big fight scene that was stupid and looked bad. And they had characters that were stupid and did dumb things. And I know you're holding your tongue here. Maybe we'll talk about Kenobi in our first TV dissection episode, but
we'll save that.
That'll be our next episode after part 2 of this comes out.
But anyway, it's
so start costing these people money, so they that way they have to downsize and smaller players can come in and start the trend, so the bigger players can just capitalize on the trends anyways.
Well, and I guess that's kind of one of my main concerns now about introducing to talk about indie again, which is what this episode is, which they introduced this Helena Shaw character, and I heard something, don't quote me, this isn't confirmed, but that they could be making a Disney Plus series with her and kind of her story, and it's like, we don't need that,
and that's not a dig at Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
No. I mean, she did a good job in the film,
I liked her performance. It's whenever you're like, we don't need that or whatever, everyone's like, everyone always makes assumptions about what you mean by it's literally just that the movie's over and we don't need that. We don't need more, I guess, quantity over quality. but like, if they made something with Helena Shaw in the future after a while, once we've had time to forget about this, awesome, cool. I'd be fine with seeing this character again. Fun. It would be fun. Again, maybe it would just be another cash grab because it'd be a reboot or whatever. But still, like, I can see it working. But why make another TV? Stop using these as like soft pilots or whatever. We're sick of it. We're sick of these things.
Yeah, if they took the time, I guess, to develop it, and they did wait several years to do it, then maybe they could actually do it right. But I don't know. Yeah. It's tough. Yeah.
And then it'll flop, and then it'll be because the fans just can't accept the woman Indiana Jones, which, I mean, I'm sure that there is some of that. I haven't heard anything really from anyone who's seen the film that was specifically about, like, they're making...
She's not... I mean, sorry.
No,
she's not trying to necessarily be an Indiana Jones either, which I'm...
Which, thank God.
Yeah.
The leaks I was reading was like, she's going to take up the mantle and whatever. And I was very happy that this film focused more on the story of Indy. but like we don't need the movie's over. We don't need more of this.
Right.
We didn't need this one.
Yeah, because they did bring back like
Willie
John Rice Davis is that his name? Sala, the actor who plays Sala. They brought him back. They brought back Marion, and they were small roles. You know, they wrapped everything up at the end of the third one, and then even in the fourth one, they did resolve certain aspects of Indiana Jones' story.
Even though we didn't need them.
Yeah, we didn't need it, but it's this one just, it didn't, you know, we didn't necessarily need this, but it did bring back some characters, and they did kind of resolve it, I guess, for a third time.
Yeah.
So
that was another criticism of the film, was like they did development off screen where like Indiana Jones like lost his son and then was going through a divorce, and like I can't believe they're undoing all this stuff from the other films. And like, yeah, I get it. You don't like it when characters develop off screen. It's typically a lazy way to do things, and also usually leads to bad moments where characters just sort of, where you just sort of retroactively decide something about a character without doing anything interesting with it. But do we really want Shia LaBeouf back? Do we really want him back for this one? And did we want to show all that, or did they have to make a movie in between where it shows him losing those and then losing his family, or did that have to be a part of this one? Or could they have just said, yeah, there's some issues going on with Indy and Marion right now? And if that struggle was more in the foreground about Indiana Jones sort of being stuck in the past and being unable to move on from things, because all that was in the background, but it needed to be more in the forefront, and I think that would have been better accepted. But yeah, some of the criticism was I don't buy into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the end of that, I think.
Yeah.
Unless you got some.
No, I think we've talked very in depth about this.
We've
this
exhausted all the words in the look in the dictionary. They've all been used.
But I would
quantum.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend this film though. It's fun, and if you're an indie fan, you will get a lot of, I think, you'll see a lot of Easter eggs and a lot of callbacks, and you'll feel the nostalgia watching this one, you know, if you're a fan. So yeah. I recommend it.
Yeah. If you're someone who wants to be entertained for 2.5 hours, and if you're like a filmmaker or someone who wants to start examining films more critically, look at the scene, look at their chase scenes and their fight scenes, and take notes, because again, even though the film itself wasn't all that great, or artistically wasn't all that great, there's so much still that you can learn from those moments. So please learn those lessons, get into Hollywood so they can stop throwing people on Google Maps and then just having them shoot at random things.
All right.
9th episode. No. I think that's it.
All right. Well, thank you. And we'll be back next week to either talk about Oppenheimer or Barbie. We're not sure which order we will be talking about those two.
They will be combined reviews. Every sentence we will alternate between them.
So that when that nuclear explosion went off at Barbie in Barbie.
Yeah.
Yeah. But all right.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Audio listeners, go watch the video. I tied off my shirt for you.
Yeah, it's fun.